good morning to the people that have chosen to join us this morning for this full council meeting of Salford City Council. Usually at this time, we would invite people to come in and share some civic prayers with us, but unfortunately this morning, the man has phoned us to let us know that he is unable to do that. So the best thing would then be to proceed with the agenda that we have. So I haven't been informed of any announcements or any business that would be seen as important business. And so can I ask Mike Ralph, the Senior Democratic Officer, Service Officer, to just read the names of the people who are here and the apologies that have been offered. Mike.
Yeah, the persons I've got present at the moment are Councillors Antrobus, August, Barnes, Bentham, Brocklehurst, Brooks, Birch, Clark, Cohen, Collinson, Critchley, Dawson, Dickman, Edwards, Fletcher, Karen Garrido, Robin Garrido, Goulden, Hamilton, Hines, Humphreys, Jolly, Jones, King, Lancaster, Leitner, McCusker, McIntyre, Merry, Morris, Mullen, Nelson, Curran-Ziza, Pevitt, Gina Reynolds, Neil Reynolds, Ryan, Saunders, Turner, Wade, Walker, Joan Walsh, John Walsh, Ward, Warmishon, Warner, Weir and Wilson. And I received apologies from Councillors Bellamy, Boschel and Lewis.
Thank you. Item number 3, any declarations of interest, either personal, prejudicial or disclosable pecuniary interests. If you need to make them. Yes?
Chair, can I just make my normal declaration regarding, as a board member of Forviva and any item which may be discussed concerning Forviva?
Thank you. Anybody else?
Chair, Councillor Walker, I will not be talking or voting if there's any votes on the Working Class Movement Library report, as I have an indirect vested interest. My wife works there.
Thank you. Nobody else?
Chair, Councillor Wade here. I will not discuss anything regarding the Working Class Movement Library, as my husband Kenneth Wade is a trustee of the library.
Thank you. Okay, item number 4 then, minutes of the last meeting on the 16th of September and the 21st of October. Can we agree that these minutes are correct?
Mr. Mayor, just a comment from Councillor Saunders first, please, if that's okay.
Councillor Saunders.
Hi, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just a brief comment. No errors or anything. Just on the in the minutes of the 16th of September, in questions to lead members, question 3 and question 4, I had asked Councillor Hines 2 questions. One about a report I'd read in the press and the media that IT had been problematic and been hacked and so on, and I asked whether there'd been any problems with our council. The council has promised to get back to me. I'd like to confirm he did, and confirm that there had been no problems, and I'd like to thank him for that. But I'd also like to point out that there was another question I asked about the difficulties people had getting through to the council. They didn't actually ask, it didn't actually say get back to me, said look into it. So I'd just like to ask whether there's been any change in that. And finally, in the minutes of the October meeting, point 35, it says that Councillor Saunders sought clarifications to the actual name of the new chief executive. I don't mean his name, his title. And I said that was sure on his door. It said city director. I think later that day or the next day, the city mayor sent a picture of the chief executive's door with his title chief executive rather than city director. So again, I thank him for that. I accept that, although I'm still sure somewhere in the not too distant past he was called city director. I can just end on a slightly light-hearted note. You may have all heard of the so-called Night of Long Knives when Harold Macmillan sacked a third of the cabinet. Well, I think the city mayor's made history because I think this is probably the first time in history that an entire council has been shown the door by its leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Councillor Kamel.
Thanks, Chair. So I just, as a point of information, I guess, there were several members missed from the roll call, including myself, and there's several in the comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kamel. Anything else?
Chair.
Councillor Hines.
Yeah, yes, I did reply to Councillor Saunders. I'm sorry, maybe I misunderstood. I thought that I'd answered it at Council, Arnie, about the telephones. I mean, obviously, you know, I accept that getting through anywhere today by telephone is sometimes very, very difficult. I accept that. I mean, the council is encouraging everybody to use new technology to contact the council. But of course, I am conscious of the fact that many people can't or don't, and we'll do everything that we can to improve our telephone system. I thought that I had said that. I apologise if I didn't.
Okay, item number 4 is the minutes of the meetings on the 16th of September and the 21st of October. Can we now agree that this is a proper account of the meetings? Any agreement?
Yeah.
Agreed.
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 Now, item number 5, I haven't been offered any communications or petitions. Do we have any that needs to be presented at this meeting? Okay, item number 6, appointment of the independent persons. Now, I need to pass this to the city solicitor to present. City solicitor.
Thank you, Chair. This report, the recommendations are for the report to be noted to approve the appointment of Ms Donna Allen as independent person for the City Council for an initial term of 4 years, to thank Jonathan Story as outgoing independent person for his commitment to the role and assistance to the current and former monitoring officers in considering allegations of breaches of the Code of Conduct for members, to approve the continuation of the current appointment of Shazia Nazir and Caroline Wolfenden as independent persons for the City Council until such time as a new seconded independent person is recommended for appointment, and to note that a further advertising and recruitment exercise for the role of independent person will be initiated to allow a further recommendation to be presented for approval at a future meeting of the Council. So that, to summarise, this report updates the full Council on a recent recruitment and advertising exercise for the appointment of 2 independent persons. Under the Localism Act, one of the ways in which the Council maintains high standards of conduct and deals with complaints about elected members is through the appointment of an independent person. It's required by the Act, by statute. This person has a number of roles, including consultation in relation to decisions on an allegation that the Council has decided to investigate in relation to elected members. Their views may also be sought on dispensations, and they also take place on the statutory panel, which advises full Council if it's necessary to dismiss statutory officers, that being the Head of Paid Service Monitoring Officer or Chief Executive. The Committee on Standards in Public Life have recommended that for resilience there should be at least 2 independent persons, and in the past we've always had 3. It's been decided going forward by the Standards Committee on the 30th of July that it would be appropriate to have 2 independent persons. This would still provide resilience, yet save costs and resources for the council. These appointments have to be approved by council, and in the past we've had them for shorter time periods. There's no time period in the legislation for how long they have to be appointed for, but the usual practice is 3 to 4 years. Going forward, it's now suggested in this report that we have appointments for a period of 4 years with a maximum term of 2 years. This will also provide consistency and allow our opportunity to gain experience. So we publicly advertised in September, and the recruitment process took place in October. Details of the panel are outlined in the report, and we are pleased to recommend that Ms Donna Allen should be appointed as our new independent person. By way of background, as detailed in the report, she's a recently retired police superintendent with the Greater Manchester Police, having led a large and complex area of command. Her other achievements have included being a borough commander of the Tameside Division, responsible for the setting of strategy and standards for 400 uniformed detective and police staff. She's now, since her retirement, been working in a voluntary capacity for a number of organisations, including Maggie Centre and the Christies. Mr Story, who has been one of our previous independent persons, has accepted the role of chair of the Standards Committee, which I will go on to outline in my next report, and would like to take this opportunity to thank him on behalf of full council for his assistance in his role as independent person. In order to fill the previous, to provide resilience, because we'd only have 1 independent person, as things currently stand, 2 of the previous independent persons, Shazir Nazir and Caroline Wolfenden, have kindly agreed going forward, subject to full council's approval, to carry on in those roles. And that concludes that report, Chair, unless there are any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. This council is asked to approve the appointment of Miss Donna Allen as the independent person for Salford City Council for an initial period of up to 4 years, together with other recommendations detailed in the report. Do I have a proposal?
Yes, I'll propose it, Chair.
And a seconder?
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you. When you're doing this, will you make sure you mention your names before you for a second, because we need to keep a good record.
Councillor Bevitt, second.
And Councillor John Walsh was the proposer.
Thank you. Item number 7, the appointment independent chair and independent member of the Standards Committee. And again, I've got to hand over to the City Solicitor, who will give the report.
Thank you,
City
Chair.
Solicitor.
Thank you, Chair. The Council has recommended to note the report, approve the appointment of Jonathan Story as independent chair to the Standards Committee for an initial term of 4 years, and to thank Ms Jackson as outgoing independent chair for her commitment to the role and to service and contribution to maintaining high standards of conduct for elected members at the City Council. And also finally to note that a further advertising and recruitment exercise for the role of the independent member of the Standards Committee will be initiated to allow recommendation to be presented for approval at a future meeting of full council. So a recent exercise has also been undertaken in relation to standards to appoint an independent chair and an independent member of the committee. We've had the independent member role vacant for some time. The report sets out the composition of the Standards Committee, requiring that we have 2 co-opted members that aren't officers of the council nor elected members. Nicole Jackson was appointed in November of 2018, but with a recommendation that her appointment should be approved annually. Unfortunately, that was missed in November of this year. And as we were also appointing for independent persons, it was thought to be an opportune time, together with a vacancy for the independent member, to regularise this appointment and also make this for a period of 4 years with a maximum of 2 terms. And that was agreed at the Standards Committee on the 30th of July of this year, subject to approval by full council. So the positions, again, as with the independent member, they were publicly advertised, and a recruitment and selection process took place in October, and the interview panel is pleased to recommend to council the appointment of Jonathan Story, who was our previous independent chair. He's been born and brought up in Greater Manchester and spent his early career working for the civil service in the Ministry of Defence. He has subsequently qualified as a barrister, predominantly in the fields of public regulatory, professional disciplinary, licensing and criminal law, and ranked in the Legal 500 chambers and partners legal directories. Since her appointment in November 2018, it is recognised that Nicole Jackson has been an extremely committed chair with a wealth of standards experience as well as governance, and has been an invaluable asset to the committee, and we would like to thank her for her contribution in this regard. And as I've stated, we'll go on, going forward, we'll seek to again advertise to fulfil the role of the independent member. And that concludes my report, Chair, unless there are any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? No questions? Okay. So the council is asked to approve the appointment of Mr. Jonathan Story as independent chair of Standards Committee for an initial term of 4 years, together with other recommendations as detailed in the report. Do I have a proposer?
Move it, Chair. Councillor John Walsh.
Seconded,
Seconder.
Councillor Mullen.
Okay, then that's approved. The City Solicitor, Salford City Council and its constitutional amendments. Again, we've to pass to the City Solicitor. We're getting our money's worth today. City Solicitor, you're going to present this. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. This report to full council is asked to approve the proposed changes to the council's constitution. There are 3 changes. They're fairly minor in nature and essentially to promote more clarity within the constitution. The constitution is currently being revamped, promoting accessibility with a clearer and simpler design. We're quite required by statute. We have a legal duty to ensure that the constitution is kept under review. And the first 2 of the changes to the constitution are in part 5 in relation to the financial regulations. So the first is to update the financial thresholds for responsibilities for chief officers from 100,000 to 150,000 in relation to vehemence on budgets up to and including that figure of 150,000 following notification to the chief finance officer. The second update is in relation to the contractual standing orders to provide clarification that exceptions of 150,000 above must be approved by procurement board, and below that they must be approved by the relevant strategic director and reported to the relevant lead member. And the final amendment is in relation to part 6, the code of conduct for members. To provide clarity, there was a section in the code of conduct at paragraph 3A that went above and beyond the statutory requirement under section 106, the Local Government and Finance Act, in relation to declarations of interest in relation to council tax arrears. So that has been pared down so that it just refers to the statutory requirements to declare an interest in relation to council tax arrears when voting on that issue once a year at Budget Council. So that's provided further clarity. And that concludes my report, Chair, unless there are any questions for me.
Thank you. Councillor Collinson.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to 3A under the Code of Conduct, my question is, what is the problem with going beyond a requirement? Surely that should be seen as good practice, and I would recommend that the paragraph in question is not removed. Thank you.
Thank you. City Solicitor, do you want to respond?
Yes, the issue was that it seemed to cause some confusion by saying there was a legal duty to make a declaration, because that legal declaration is only required once if somebody is in a council meeting where the council tax is being set and they have 2 or more months worth of council tax arrears. That is the only point where the legal duty arises, and the additional paragraph gave an impression there was a legal duty to declare it at all other meetings. It could have been interpreted in that way. If there is a decision to keep that paragraph within the Code of Conduct, then I think it certainly needs to be clarified. That it's actually a requirement of the Code of Conduct rather than a legal duty to declare it other than that. And it is not normal practice in a lot of Code of Conducts that I've not previously seen it myself, to have that requirement in any other situation other than it being in a situation under Section 106 at the Budget Council when the council tax is being set for the year.
Thank you. Councillor Garrido.
Sorry, I think.
Sorry, Chair. It's Councillor Turner first.
No, yeah, I was going to say Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Councillor Greedo.
Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Chair. Well, the last thing I want in this council meeting is confusion. I note that the council constitution is being revamped according to the executive report. I'm not actually keen on this steady stream of amendments coming through to full council. I don't feel that's the avenue, for the first avenue. I do appreciate that the constitution requires constant updating by law, but in days gone by, we used to have a small cross-party subcommittee that would look at forthcoming changes in the constitution. This would be prior to the submission to full council. This would enable any changes to be discussed in the respective groups in advance, and I think generally would make things progress much smoother and thus avoid the sort of things that we're just getting at the moment. So I would ask the council support or to reinstate this small cross-party that could look at these constitutional changes and go through them together prior to it coming to full council. Then I think you'll feel that it will pass much smoother through without much question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. City Solicitor, do you need to respond?
I wasn't previously aware of that group. Indeed, the Standards Committee themselves would have a role in looking at the Code of Conduct and reviewing that from time to time. Ultimately, it's the monitoring officer's responsibility as well to ensure that the Constitution is kept up to date ultimately, and obviously the Code of Conduct is part of that, of the Constitution, that sort of goes hand in hand. Obviously there's consultation as appropriate, but this particular paragraph that seems to be excluded is saying there's a legal duty to make a declaration, but that legal duty only applies to the setting of the council tax. So this is why this particular paragraph was sought to be excluded.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Garrido.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I have to say that I totally agree with what Councillor Turner was saying. I remember sitting weeks and weeks and weeks when we were doing this. When the ceremonial mayor was, not the ceremonial, the mayor was actually involved in it. The city mayor was involved in it. And I think that we should be actually looking at these if they're being, because I'm, for one, don't like drip feeding, because what happens, things go through that in the end we think, why did we agree to that? And I'm not just about the members section on this one, but it's about actually increasing the amount of money that the new chief executive, or the chief executive at the moment, can actually spend. It's going up from 100 to 150, and I'm not happy about that either. And I think we were told at the agenda setting that these were minor alterations. I don't think these are minor alterations. I think they are very, very important alterations, and I think we should have some discussion about it. So I'd like to agree with Councillor Turner that we actually take this back, we relook at it as a group, whether it's done in standards or whatever, but it needs to be looked at by members, and then we can actually vote on that when it comes back to council. But at the moment, I'm sorry, I'd have to vote against this because I don't actually think that we've done enough consultation on it with members. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Guido. Any other questions?
Sorry,
Councillor Collinson just wants to come back.
City Mayor,
Thank you.
point of order, City Mayor. For some reason, the comments don't seem to be coming through, right? Because I would like to put my name down to speak, if I may.
Will you use chat? We'll be happy to hear you speak. Councillor Collinson.
Sorry, chat keeps saying it's failed. That's the point. So
I see what you mean. Okay, we know that you want to speak. Councillor Collinson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm just going back to what I was asking about before on 3A. I think as councillors, we have a duty to be as open and transparent as possible and lead by example, set a good example, and obviously pay our council tax. It's a priority bill. It has to be paid. And any councillor that is not able to pay it, it's not just a case of withdrawing from a meeting so that they can't vote. There has to be more action taken than that. That's just not acceptable. And to me, what we're trying to do here is water down something that is already in place in the Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you. City Mayor. City Mayor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Obviously, I've heard the questions raised, and these reports, I understand, went before the agenda setting committee. So there has been an opportunity to raise these points. Obviously, colleagues have taken the decision to raise them at full council rather than as potentially finding a way forward at the agenda setting group on some of these. But I have to say, having listened to colleagues from the opposition party, you know, I'm more than happy for us to agree to discuss these on a cross-party basis before bringing them to full council. I guess the question I have of the city solicitor, given that this is a city solicitor report, is that are these amendments to the Constitution urgent, or would it be possible for us to discuss them further on a cross-party basis? And if so, then I would be happy personally to defer on that basis. Thank you, Ceremonial Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Mary.
Right, thank you very much. Unfortunately, my comments don't seem to be coming through the chat, so I'm trying to find a way of communicating I wish to speak, so it's a bit awkward. I just want to endorse what the City Mayor has said. I recall the previous working parties that we've had on the Constitution. I think it probably would be good if we don't have any nasty surprises, and I would actually ask if this is required at this moment in time, or if we could have a further discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Mary. Councillor Ward.
Oh, good morning. Thanks, Chair. I believe this, Sushan, this should go through the growth and prosperity, surely, if we're going from 100 to 150.
If I may respond through you, Chair.
Yes.
I'm not aware of the full background to the changes in the financial regulations proposed. I don't know if our Chief Finance Officer is on the call, if she could provide any clarity on that point. I can certainly respond in relation to the Code of Conduct issue. It wouldn't appear that she's on the call.
Yes, Chair, would you like me to answer? Me to answer on the approval levels.
Yes, please.
Okay, so just to pick that up, It is a review that we've done in terms of the level of approvals. And it's trying to bring things back in line in terms of, so this is talking about environments. It's also trying to bring this in line in terms of things like the procurement rules and approval levels for incurring expenditure. So when Sian said it's about tidying up, it is trying to bring more consistency in terms of the approval levels that we've already got built into other areas of the Constitution and financial regs.
Thank you. I've got one more speaker in this, and it is...
Yeah, Councillor Turner, Mr Mayor, and then Councillor Karen Garrido, please.
And then I want to cut it there because the City Mayor has asked or made a proposal, and I'd like to put that to the Council. So, Councillor Turner.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, my whole intention was to stop this sort of thing, and I feel that the proposal I put forward, which I'm glad the City Mayor and Councillor Merry agrees with, is the way forward. And I just want to make it clear, I was talking about the Constitution in its entirety, not standards, not any part of it. And I'd certainly second the City Mayor's proposal, as I believe he is proposing that we have these cross-party meetings, which I think will be a great thing. Thank you.
Thank you. City Solicitor.
Thank you, Chair. The Code of Conduct amendment is not absolutely urgent. It was just the fact that I felt that it was rather ambiguous, so that could await if further discussions required by members.
Thank you.
It certainly needs tidying up the wording of it, but as I say, it wasn't absolutely urgent.
Right. Councillor Karen Garrido.
Yeah, I just wanted to point the City Mayor to my comment in the chat box. This did not come to standards. We were told that it was minor alterations, agenda setting, sorry. We were told that it was just minor alterations because it wasn't ready at that time. So no, we didn't see it at the agenda setting. Thank you.
Thank you. City Mayor, can I just go back to what you said? You suggested that this is withdrawn and put forward for cross-party further discussions. Is that the case?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. That is the case. I'm suggesting that all constitutional amendments form part of a cross-party meeting prior to any amendments being ratified at full council. Absolutely.
Thank you. Then this council meeting was asked to approve proposed changes. We have decided that rather than agree to proposed changes, we defer it and send it back for cross-party discussion, tidying up with the expectation that it would be brought back to a future council meeting. Do we have agreement?
Agree.
Agreed.
Agree. Agree.
I think it's agreed. So this item's deferred. It's going to be discussed at a cross-party group. It's going to be tidied up, and then it'll be represented to the full council for agreement. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Item number 9. You've got a buy on this one, City Solicitor. Councillor Bill Hines, I'm going to ask you now to present the Treasury Management Strategy for 2020-2021, the mid-year review. So, Councillor Hines.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just say that this isn't going to come up at every council meeting, Chair. I think you'll all be thankful for that. Remember, though, I did do one at the last council meeting, which was the end of the year one, which has been delayed, of course, because of the issues that we've all been experiencing. Yes, this is a mid-year report. First of all, can I say that Councillor Robin Garrido asked me a number of questions at the last meeting. I did send him a response to that. I've had no reply from Councillor Robin Garrido, and therefore I understand that he would well be content and satisfied with that reply. Also, can I say that at overview and scrutiny a couple of weeks ago, where this report went in detail, Tony Thompson from my directorate gave the panel there a fully comprehensive understanding of how Treasury management works. And I'd like to thank Tony, and I'm sure that members of that overview committee would as well. I thought it went down very, very well on an issue that at times can be rather complex and a bit dry. Anyway, here we go with the mid-year statement. Well, and I've pulled out some points that because it's very much similar to the one I did 2 months ago. But just on the state of the economy, we've got that we look at carefully vis-a-vis interest rates. We see that interest rates are now very, very low, understanding that they will continue to be low while we experience this crisis with COVID-19 and the rest of it. And in fact, of course, the Bank of England a few months ago was really considering whether we went into negative interest rates. At the moment, that does seem to have stalled, like many other countries in Europe have been experiencing over the last number of years. The strategy itself, as I've said many, many times, it's about making sure that we have a security on whatever investments we make. We look and make sure that we have liquidity so that we're in a position to pay our bills. And of course, on whatever investments we make, we try to get the best yield that we can. I've mentioned again, and I'll do it today again, that over the last 7 or 8 months, the government we've received just under 48 million pound in business grants that have been distributed to local businesses. We've had not under 9 million pound for COVID-19 funding from the government. We've had 31 grants of Section 31 grants. We've had 11.4 million there. So, we are obviously keep putting in responses to government on our financial position vis-a-vis the loss of income and the extra expenditure that we've had. The council's capital position, you won't be surprised, I touched upon this last time, when the mayor presented to the annual budget in February, which was, at that time, it was probably the best budget that we've had for 10 years going forward, both from a revenue budget and a capital budget. But of course, because of what's been happening, that capital spend, which was 160.4 million, has now reduced to 125. And we're keeping a look all the time at the capital programme of what might go through and what might not at this point in time because of all the issues that you're well aware of. On the investment portfolio, the reduction in interest rates has reduced the interest income from our investments. However, it will be more than offset by the amounts of money that we borrow. So in conclusion, the long-term borrowing for finance capital expenditure will be kept under review. There will be no new long-term borrowing. No new long-term borrowing has been undertaken by the council this year. We've stayed within our limits, and of course, as you would expect, I and our officers are keeping a very, very tight view on where we go with that. I just want to also, if I can just find the issue that I was wanting to say. Yeah, it was about fossil fuels and our investments in fossil fuels. I was asked by a member of where we are with fossil fuels because there has been some confusion elsewhere. But this City Council stands by its fossil fuel statement that we made a number of years ago, in particularly to the Treasury Management, and that we watch it with all vigilance and will continue to do so. With that, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Civic Mayor, I've nothing else to say, but if any questions come, I'll do my best to answer them, or if there is a complex nature of GoToast, I'll get back later. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hines. I've got one question notified. Councillor Robin Garrido.
Thank you, Chair, and can I thank Councillor Hines for his presentation of the statement. He may or may not be surprised to know, in fact, that I'm going to support what he has just said. I think it's important, in fact, that the Council recognises the amount of hard work that has been done over the past few months by our finance team. I'd really like the Council to actually minute thanks to Joanne Hardman, our finance officer, and her team, and it's a big team that's involved many people, for the way that they've been able to handle the very severe financial situation which this council, and in fact all councils, have been faced with over the past 7 or 8 months. It's been a difficult time. It's been a time when had to be a lot of juggling of finances. I'd also like to add, of course, that we've had significant help from the government with tens of millions of pounds contributed either directly from the government or via Greater Manchester. And I think it's beholden on us to actually recognise the work that's been done. I won't miss you, Councillor Hines, off those thanks. Clearly, you are the leader of the group, and I'm sure that you have been involved in a considerable amount of work yourself. So I obviously keep open my comments for next year when we actually look at the budget, and maybe I'll be saying some different things about what we ought to be doing from next year onwards. But at this point in time, really, I do think we ought to record our thanks to our finance officer and her team, and to Bill, for the amount of work that they've done and the way they've managed to keep the council on a steady keel. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor.
Oh, sorry. Can I just add in, thank you, Councillor Hines, for your email. I did receive it. I didn't think it needed a reply because, in fact, the response you gave was very adequate, and you did actually answer the few questions which I raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garrido. Councillor Kamel. Councillor Kamel.
Thank you, Chair. Just Councillor Hines mentioned the question of investment in fossil fuel industries, and he said there was a statement made several years ago that would still fully stand by. As a relatively new member of the council, I'd like to at least revisit that and make sure that we publicly reissue that statement if it's still applicable, because I'm not aware of what it is, to be honest. So for the benefit of the newer members and for the public, I think we should revisit that and restate it as appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kamel. City Mayor, you wanted to come back in.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to make a comment, really, and thank Councillor Hines and also Joanne Hardman as the Section 151 officer of the City Council for all their really hard work in obviously presenting what seem relatively positive mid-year statement in light of obviously the ongoing challenges as a consequence of the COVID-19 pandemic. And my comment really is to say, you know, this is positive news in some respects, but when we look around the country, I am quite concerned about what's happening with local government financing. And colleagues may be aware that Croydon has recently issued a Section 114 notice, again, because of the challenges of COVID-19. And, you know, all of this is against the backdrop of 10 years of austerity and cuts, which has obviously disproportionately impacted local government and, in my opinion, created a precarious financial situation. And colleagues on this call will be only too familiar that this City Council has seen 211 million cut in unfunded budget pressures and cuts to the revenue support grant. 53% of core funding from central government has been taken away from the city of Salford. And I think we should rightly acknowledge that as we move forward. As has already been highlighted by colleagues, it is welcome that government has come forward with additional support over the last few months during the COVID-19 pandemic. However, what I would say is that support isn't being mainstreamed in our budget. These are one-off payments to help in the short term. And I guess I'm just flagging an ongoing concern I have around the future of local government finances moving forward. Obviously, at the end of this month, we've got the Chancellor making his spending review announcement, and I'll be watching with great interest to see what the government has to say about the future of local government financing. The government said they would recompense local government for the loss of income as a consequence of COVID-19 and also the increased expenditure we've incurred. And I guess it's our job as elected members to hold the government's feet to the fire on the promise it's made to local government in this country moving forward. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
Chair, can I come back?
Yeah, I was going to invite you back, Councillor Hines. There's no other questions, there's no other comments, so please, Councillor Hines.
Okay, yes, well, of course, thank you to Councillor Robin Garrido for his comments that he made, and he certainly, I endorse, and when he congratulates Joanne Hardman and the team, I'm thankful for that. But I do that to Joanne every time I see her. I think that she's first class in the job that she does, and the team that she heads has worked extremely well. And the management financially over the years, as I said very earlier on of my statement, put us in an extremely better position that we'd had for 10 years through that good management to go for the city mayor to present the budget in February. Of course, that's been blown. And then, of course, what the city mayor has said, well, you've heard me say it many, many times. Local government has not had a fair crack of the whip over the last 10 years. We've made the cuts that the mayor has made. And of course, we are, as he says, watching this space very, very clearly, because not only of Croydon, but there are many other local authorities who are very near to the wire of this 141 going forward. And therefore, you know, we are in a very, very, or could be in a very, very serious position as time takes over. So with that, Chair, I think I've no more to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hines. So the Council is asked to note the contents of this report and to approve the update to the potential invest indicators. Do I have a proposal?
So I'll propose Councillor Heather Fletcher.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Second.
I'll second it, Councillor Mike Pevitt.
Councillor Pevitt, thank you. Okay, so that's approved. Noted and approved. So item number 10 is the Greater Manchester Special Framework, and that's Councillor Androbus.
Thank you very much, Ceremonial Mayor. Members of the council will have received the email sent out by the City Mayor indicating the position that Stockport have taken with regard to their consideration of the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework. As a consequence of that, it would seem wrong for us to proceed with consideration of that report today. If there are amendments to it, then they would clearly have to come back again at a future date, and we would have to go through the whole process again. So it doesn't seem sensible to proceed with it today. So it is my intention to withdraw, with the consent of the seconder, this item from consideration by the council. In doing so, I would, however, like to draw the council's attention to a rather disturbing situation which has arisen, and I was briefed on earlier this week, with regard to the Broad Oak site, which many members will be aware of. You'll be aware that we had yet another victory against Peel in the courts to resist development of this site, and that consequent on that victory, Peel announced that they would not pursue the judicial route to securing development of this site, and I have no reason to believe that that position has changed. But what I was briefed on earlier this week is that Peel maintain their objections to the policies in the local plan to strengthen protection of this site, and they also want to come forward with proposals to develop parts of the site as part of a policy change within the local plan. That is obviously something that we will have to give due consideration to as a legal body. But what it does demonstrate is that although statements have been made about not pursuing a judicial route to securing development of this site, there are still powerful vested interests wanting to see this site developed. The reason why I mention this now is because, of course, the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework includes proposals to designate this site as Greenbelt, which would give it the strongest protection possible. And so it really is incumbent upon us as a City Council to try to bring forward that proposal at the earliest available opportunity to make sure that we do protect these sites which are under threat. I'm very conscious that in withdrawing the statement, it will no longer be open for questions or discussion by members of the council, but I will be willing to take members' comments or questions during the lead member questions. So with that, Ceremonial Mayor, I withdraw the report from consideration by the council.
Thank you, Councillor Antrobus. Do you have a seconder for Councillor Antrobus's proposal?
Chair, I'm the seconder on the report, so I consent to withdrawal.
Fine, thank you very much. And as Councillor Antrobus has said, I know that Councillor Garrido, you wanted to come in, but he will be able to listen and respond to at lead member's question rather than now.
Well, Chair, with respect, I want to comment on the deferment, not on the detail of the report. And therefore, that should surely be done now because it's being moved and seconded that this be deferred. And it's on the deferment I wish to speak.
Thank you.
On point of order, Chair.
Point of order.
There isn't a proposal to defer this. It is simply being withdrawn.
Thank you.
Well, there is still a proposal on the table, Chair, and that has to be voted on. Therefore, you should surely allow comments on that motion to withdraw.
Well,
nobody has moved a deferral. I've withdrawn it.
You've withdrawn it, and the City Mayor has withdrawn it as a seconder, and so there's no reason to have any questions at the minute. So we will go on to the next agenda item.
Could I ask for a ruling on that, please, from the City Solicitor?
City
Because
Solicitor.
there's been a mover and a seconder that this be withdrawn. On that basis, members of the council should be able to comment on that withdrawal.
The person who would make the ruling, Councillor Garrido, would be the ceremonial mayor as chair. But my advice is that it's simply being withdrawn, and it wouldn't really be a matter which would be debated if it's withdrawn.
Okay, I'll comment when it comes to council answers. I'll comment at that stage. Then it does seem to be the wrong way around. It does seem to be a way of trying to shut people up. But nevertheless, we will talk later.
You've had your ruling. You've got the opportunity to come back to the league member. Moving on to agenda item number 11, the statement from the City Mayor. City Mayor, give a statement, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and welcome to everybody. Obviously, we meet for full council again at what is a difficult and challenging time during a period of national lockdown as a consequence of the COVID-19 virus. And I'd like to start today by welcoming our new Chief Exec into the organisation, Mr. Tom Stannard, who made his way through what was a very competitive recruitment process to be appointed the city's new chief executive. Tom impressed our cross-party panel with his detailed knowledge of the city, his passion for local government, and also his excellent presentation. And with a background in economic development and inclusive growth, I'm very much looking forward to working with him to help continue the economic success story we've seen in our city over recent years, and obviously the work towards a prosperous future for all our Salford residents. We've also recently observed Remembrance Sunday in the city, a day which was in many ways very different from years past. And however, under these severe restrictions, our council officers were still able to organise a fitting service to remember the many lives lost in conflict, the tragedy of war, and the sacrifices made to us today by generations past and present. And whilst conflict regrettably continues to exist in our world, in many ways threatening to grow ever more acute in our era of instability and anxiety, such services are essential to remind us of the sanctity of life and the importance of freedom and the price paid to preserve both in times of conflict. Following from this year's sombre and fitting tribute in the year of the 75th anniversary of VE Day and the centenary since the burial of the unknown warrior at Westminster Abbey, I will continue to do my best to support our armed forces community to ensure that they and their families enjoy the years that lie ahead in dignity and contentment. Looking after our troops, veterans and their families shouldn't stop when the fighting ceases. And we must make sure that the homes fit for heroes promise previous generations of soldiers is a standard we live up to both today and in the future. The COVID-19 restrictions, which so transformed our remembrance ceremony, also continue to impede our lives and our businesses, preventing millions in our country from seeing their loved ones and their family. And in the run-up to Christmas, many families will be wondering how to make their plans. And whilst we await further instructions from government, it is worthwhile to note that the current phase of lockdown is working in Salford and across Greater Manchester. I can report that in all age groups, the number of transmissions is decreasing. Transmission seems to be highest currently amongst ages of 22 to 24, post-university working age people, and also amongst some ethnic minority communities in the city. These numbers are the product of hundreds of thousands of Salfordians doing the right thing to protect their friends, neighbours, colleagues, family and loved ones. And the deprivations which we must face to bring this virus under control are in many respects great, but together we will beat this virus. To help in this process, colleagues will be aware that Salford has participated in the government's mass testing pilot known as Operation Moonshot, administering the direct saliva lamp test. Our findings to date, unfortunately, have been mixed, but we will continue to work with the government to ascertain the most appropriate testing technology. Lateral flow tests in Liverpool appear to be achieving much more comprehensive results, and it may be that lateral flow tests play a key role in the future of Britain's testing programme. However, I do live in hope that with the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, concerns about testing may become an academic exercise in the near future. AstraZeneca vaccine tests have shown a 96% success rate in phase 2 testing and are proving successful. They're now moving into phase 3. This was reported recently in The Lancet. And by early next year, the vaccine could well herald the end of this pandemic and allow us once more to continue the world beyond COVID-19. A world where all in society and our economy will need to be helped back onto their feet. But I have to say, rocky waters still remain ahead. This country's economic outlook does look bleak, with the threat of no-deal Brexit still threatening to cost billions of lost trade, tariffs, and knock-on international confidence in our financial markets. And in the meantime, the pantomime soap opera in Whitehall is distracting public attention with the latest departure of one of the Prime Minister's chief allies, Dominic Cummings. You might say that Cummings is finally going, suspiciously soon after the Prime Minister's inquiry as to the source of the leak around the second lockdown. Lee Kane and Dominic Cummings have announced their departure. I, for one, live in hope that the departure heralds the end of an era in which government has operated erratically and unilaterally, waging war against the civil service and creating chaos and confusion. But I shall not hold my breath. Colleagues will have glimpsed some of this chaos during Andy Burnham's negotiations with government over the terms of Tier 3 lockdown, a time-wasting exercise which was negotiation in name only, in my opinion. We requested the money we needed to ensure a proper furlough arrangement support for the people of Salford and Greater Manchester. This was essential not just to protect people's livelihoods, but to also encourage compliance with the new restrictions. We requested support for businesses and self-employed to ensure our economy was not completely destroyed by new restrictions. We produced our workings and showed the government our evidence-based calculations, but the government did not listen. This did not provide figures from the government, nor did they question the figures we provided. They simply put forward a sum of money, initially 55 million, and told us this was all that was available. And after a tussle in the national media in which Greater Manchester leaders refused to sell the people of Salford and Greater Manchester short of what we needed to secure their well-being through the restrictions, the most farcical sequence of events played out. Not a few days after negotiations ended, government announced that they had secretly negotiated a Tier 2 package for businesses to ease their pain in many respects in Greater London. And that was at the same time whilst they were negotiating with Greater Manchester. And obviously in Greater Manchester, we'd been in tier restrictions for just under 3 months. And that same money would be available and backdated to us. Discussions which government negotiations never thought fit to share and mention with Greater Manchester at the time. And following from this, government U-turned on their furlough commitments, extending the 80% furlough pay on offer nationally. In effect, Greater Manchester have gotten everything we asked for. However, government did lie to us when they told us money wasn't available. And they lied to us when they told us they were negotiating in good faith. And shockingly, the people of Greater Manchester discovered that the money could be found, but only once London was impacted. So much for levelling up in the north. And whilst local authorities continue to battle with a government which treats us with such contempt, the concerning symptoms of the economic crisis continue to make themselves felt. In Salford, the figures are stark. households owed a main homelessness duty have increased by 102% since last year to 525. 237 households were placed into temporary accommodation between January and March, a 52% increase. Salford Homelessness Search has seen its waiting list rise to over 7,300. There are also currently 210 individuals housed in Salford under Mayor Burnham's Bed Every Night scheme. Responding to these pressing issues, we are making a firm response in the City of Salford. Enhancing pre-eviction protocols have been extended to cover 4 of the largest registered providers in the city. We've launched a new service for private rented sector landlords to help reduce evictions. We've reviewed the homelessness pledges of our registered providers and put in place support for care leavers to access sustained accommodation. But fundamentally, we know that the current housing and homelessness crisis is caused by a lack of truly affordable housing. This is why it's with great regret that I heard yesterday of plans to defer the upcoming Greater Manchester Spatial Framework, Greater Manchester's plan for jobs, the environment and housing for our future. Now more than ever, it is vital to ensure a future for our city region, provide stability and a long-term plan, protecting ourselves against the chaos of developer and landowner determined development and planning by appeal. Opponents of the GMSF primarily oppose the development on Greenbelt land, but the GMSF is the biggest protection available against correcting our Greenbelt concerns. National government provide us with objectively assessed housing need figures, figures we must abide by in testing local plans. And I also note last week in the press and the media that government yet again are looking to revise the local housing need methodology with a view to protecting councils in the south and sending more housing numbers to the Midlands and the north. Really concerning development at the heart of government, which flies in the face of robust strategic planning. This means that every local authority is given a target number of homes to deliver and a required 5-year forward supply of land on which to build them. The GMSF has allowed us to allocate these sites proportionately across Greater Manchester. Nowhere has been left untouched, but collectively the plan has enabled us to protect green space and make the best use of brownfield sites. In Salford, 85% of the proposed development is on brownfield land for housing, and Salford is the only local authority in Greater Manchester to see a net increase in its Greenbelt land as a consequence of the GMSF. And it's ironic that uncertainty over the GMSF is most pronounced in Stockport, the greatest single beneficiary of the GMSF's allocations. Through the GMSF, Stockport...
On the point of order, Mr. Mayor.
I'll give way.
Thank you. We heard a few minutes ago that the GMSF had been withdrawn by this council. We're now, in fact, being a rehearsal by the city mayor, who is wanting to debate the GMSF. Surely that is not correct when this item is being withdrawn.
That's not a point of order.
Can I just confirm this is the statement of the city mayor to full council? It's my understanding that I'm perfectly within my rights to make comment about the developments that happened in Greater Manchester last night in my address to full council today. Can I have a legal ruling on that?
That's what I've asked for.
The ultimate decision is for the ceremonial mayor as chair, but my advice is that this is a separate matter in terms of it being the city mayor's statement. I don't know if Councillor Garrido can direct us to the provision in the Constitution that he feels is being breached.
I can't direct you to a particular number, but it seems clear that the City Mayor is talking about an item which is being withdrawn.
I think that this is permissible under the circumstances. It's the City Mayor's statement. He's referring to a number of different matters that are current issues at present. It's not a decision as such on the GMSF itself. Thank you.
Chair, you're on mute, Chair.
I'm back on. I'm sorry for that. As far as I'm aware, as far as I'm concerned, I'll be guided by the City Solicitor and refer back to the City Mayor as part of your address to the members. So back to you, City Mayor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Much appreciated. Okay, so we were talking about the situation in Stockport, and obviously through the GMSF, Stockport is set to deliver almost 5,000 homes less than the government's figure recommends, inevitably protecting green space from development. The Liberal Democrats in Stockport have opposed these plans from the start, playing politics with the plan and banking on the public not picking up on the intricacies of these proposals. The greatest shame in this situation is that all sides know that the GMSF provides the best guarantees for Stockport's greenbelt, and that a vote against it is a vote for concreting over beautiful and vital green space, not just there, but also over Greater Manchester. Yet, for short-term political gain, it seems that the Liberal Democrats are willing to scupper the plan and condemn the plan to death, whilst claiming to the public they are doing the exact opposite. This is shameful politicking from the Liberal Democrats in Stockport, toying with the green space and the trust of the electorate. But seeing as Stockport's Liberal Democrats are clearly willing to put their own short-term prospects above the well-being of Stockport and Greater Manchester residents, the plans must be deferred to allow time for the sensible Conservative members and independent members on Stockport Council to hopefully find a way forward. The GMSF sets out a plan for jobs and homes across Greater Manchester, promising 50,000 affordable homes over the years up until 2037. 30,000 of those homes will be capped at the local housing allowance or at social rents. It also commits us to carbon neutrality by 2038, providing employment and business development opportunities in key strategic areas of the conurbation. And most of all, it protects the conurbation's precious greenbelt. But now all of this must be put on hold while further conversations and talks and discussions take place. However, here in Salford, we will not delay our plans. Regardless of the prospects of the GMSF, we are driving forward with the city's housing and growth ambitions for the people of our city. Our in-house development company, Derive, has been awarded planning permission for new council homes on 3 sites in Clifton Green and Ryle and Brassington Avenues. Another site to be developed by Salix Homes, providing Derive with new units, has achieved planning permission at Cara Street. And cabinet papers documents are being finalised with regards to a business plan for a further 300 units at Longshore Drive, St Luke's and Irwell Valley. Thanks to the long-term strategic investments of this council, our city's economy has fared relatively well when compared with other local authorities. Demand for high quality office space in Salford is still high, most notably with the recent announcement of 2,000 jobs being relocated to 4 New Bailey for the relocation of BT staff. It's also encouraging to see commitment from global technology occupiers such as BT and Tech Mahindra, taking space at Peel's The Vic at Salford Quays as part of their expansion plans. We continue to work towards our carbon neutrality targets with partners, as well as developing new climate change adaptation technologies. Energy House 2.0 has commenced on site, reducing emissions from homes, and will be a huge element of achieving our carbon neutrality target of 2038. The University of Salford has also completed phase 1 of its innovative living lab. The construction is part of the Ignition project, of which the council is a partner, which looks to relieve the pressure of climate change in urban areas through financing of nature-based solutions, and aims to inspire organisations to invest in these preventative measures. Phase 1, including a rain garden, and phase 2 is currently under construction, which comprises of a green roof, living wall, and sustainable drainage systems. These kinds of green infrastructure are vital and a proven way to reduce the effects of climate change while saving businesses money and energy in the long run. And our investment in green infrastructure continues at pace. In addition to the 127 million invested into Salford's parks and green spaces over the course of the last few years, we're also now participating in the Department for Transport's e-scooter trials. Further to this, 9 million of walking and cycling improvements are due to start early in 2021 on Trafford Road and Salford Greenway, with a further 2.8 million investment in RHS walking and cycling connections expected to be confirmed in early 2021. And at this point, I'd also like to thank Dr. Lee K. Hung for his exceptionally generous donation of £1.8 million towards the realisation of RHS Bridgewater, the Chinese Streamside Garden, and the promotion of Chinese art and heritage culture in Chinese Garden. That is a deeply appreciated donation to the City of Salford and the realisation of RHS Bridgewater. The council, as has already been highlighted, continues to campaign for more funds for Salford, submitting our response to the government's comprehensive spending review last month. In our response, Salford focuses on the importance of investment in our public transport network to aid the development of an integrated, modern and accessible network. Our submission also emphasises the importance of delivering transport connections at Port Salford, whilst also connecting Media City UK with the university campus at the Crescent. These are significant planks of our city's ongoing economic recovery. And thanks to the long-term planning set in place by previous council leaderships, Salford's growth prospects remain strong in the face of adversity. And Salford Labour's commitment to reindustrialise and revive our city's economic futures in the wake of Thatcher's deindustrialisation in the 1980s. This is truly a city of makers and doers, and with a council committed to real investment and involvement, we will continue to thrive. Between 2015 and 19, employment in our city has risen from 121,000 to 143,000, an 18.2% growth. This is the highest in Greater Manchester. Finally, Chair, I'd like to finish by saying thank you. Thank you to everyone who has been involved in the work of the Spirit of Salford network. Colleagues will be aware that the government decided not to fund school meals for families entitled to free school meals over the summer holidays. And subsequently, we've seen, as a consequence of the workers of Marcus Rashford, the government do a U-turn on that, providing support over the Christmas holidays, which is good to see. And I'm pleased to see that the government has come to their senses and prioritised the importance of supporting young people, children and families in these really difficult times. But in light of the government's decision not to fund free school meal support over the school holidays recently, I took the decision to immediately support those children and those families in our city. And I'm pleased to report to council today that almost 2,000 free school meal support has been claimed in the city of Salford during half term. Vouchers just short of £20,000 has been claimed. 700 vouchers, incidentally, were collected on the first day that this scheme came online. So I'd like to thank everyone involved, because I know officers turned this around exceptionally quickly and delivered a great scheme for the people of Salford. But in addition to the scheme itself, I'd like to place on record my thanks and appreciation to the community and voluntary organisations in the city, the charities in the city, and the businesses in the city that came together in true Salford style under that banner of the Spirit of Salford to support our children and families over those holiday periods. It's amazing to see the Spirit of Salford in action, and I'm deeply, deeply appreciative of everything that everyone is doing and continues to do in these difficult and challenging times. Thank you, Chair and members of the Council.
Thank you, City Mayor. At this point, we have a 10-minute break. Everybody should be back here at 11 o'clock, and at that time we'll offer general questions and comments to the City Mayor based on his statement to us as a council. So 10 minutes, and I'll see you then. would you like to ask a question, please, or offer your comment?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, comments are more than questions, I think. Where does one start? I think I'll just start briefly with GMSF. And obviously, we're not going to debate that now, Chair. There will be time to debate that both later and also at another place. But for those councillors who were not aware that the opposition have successfully submitted a call-in request on the GMSF yesterday, I've had confirmation first thing this morning that that has been accepted. So that, in effect, Chair, would have had the effect that, in our opinion, this item couldn't have been satisfactorily discussed anyway this afternoon or this morning. And I think really the City Mayor was rather using Stockport as an excuse for it to be withdrawn because the matter couldn't have been decided without Cabinet further considering this matter and making a further decision after the call-in has been dealt with. So obviously we'll get an opportunity to talk again then.
Point of order, Chair. Point of order.
Point of order. City Mayor.
Just to be clear, and the City Solicitor might want to confirm this, but the decision of the executive, i.e. the decision of Cabinet mayoral team, was a decision to publish the GMSF. The decision of full council is the decision to submit the GMSF to the Secretary of State for public examination. I just want it noted that these are two different decisions. So I understand the point Councillor Gredo is making about call-in being accepted, but I just want it noted that they are two different decisions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, City Mayor. City Solicitor, do you want to add anything?
Yes, it is correct that they are two separate decisions as set out, and the matter could still have proceeded for a decision today, but the recommendation would have to have been amended to show that it was subject to the City Mayor's decision not changing as a result of the call-in process.
Thank you. Councillor Gredo, do you want to continue, please?
Yes, I will, City Mayor, because just to confirm that, I had an email this morning from the City Solicitor, and I'll just read the relevant part. It said that report could have proceeded today with an amended recommendation reflecting the call-in situation, essentially along the lines of the decision being subject to the City Mayor's Cabinet decision being implemented. So it does actually refer to the Cabinet decision being implemented, according to the advice I received this morning from the City Solicitor. But I think let's just carry on. I think Stockport was being used in a bit of a wise hone, and I'm a bit surprised that the City Mayor spent so much time talking about Stockport. I wonder if there's any seats available in that area for him. Certainly welcome to have him. But we'll deal with the details of the GMSF later on. Suffice it to say, Chair, that as far as the GMSF is concerned, our concern is that the people of this city have not been listened to sufficiently, and that's certainly one of our grounds for the call-in. But just moving on now to other matters, I'll go back to the comments about COVID. Really pleased, in fact, that testing is starting to work, however limited that may be. And we do know, in fact, that it's not as brilliant as it could be. But I think under the circumstances, and I think with the rush that there had to be to actually introduce it, I think it's heartening to see that it is working. Particularly Liverpool, in fact, which is doing obviously a full test open to all its residents. And that really brings me to another matter as far as COVID is concerned. And I'm really sorry, in fact, that the City Mayor couldn't act in a more statesman-like manner when talking about COVID. And I refer really to the pantomime. He refers to the pantomime in government. I'd actually refer to the pantomime in Greater Manchester. That was the pantomime act where the two main characters were the Greater Manchester Mayor and the City of Salford Mayor. I'm afraid they didn't do this city any justice in the way that they behaved. In fact, they delayed receiving money for 3 weeks or more than 3 weeks. Liverpool accepted straight away, and I think they were sensible. They agreed financial assistance right at the outset. That could have been the case as far as Salford was concerned, or Greater Manchester, but the two mayors, Andy Burnham and yourself, City Mayor, chose to play politics with it. I'm really sorry that every time you speak about COVID, you have to play politics with it, instead of doing what is best for the people of Salford and the people of Greater Manchester. We've had to wait more than 3 weeks for the money because of the delays that you both caused. We've had to wait, and I hope, in fact, it's not caused anybody any significant ill health by having to wait for that period of time. It was pretty clear that we needed to introduce the tier 3, and of course now we're into the lockdown, and that should have been introduced by Greater Manchester immediately, such as it was in Liverpool. So I'm really sorry that we have a city mayor that chooses to play politics with his mate in Manchester rather than look after the residents of Salford. I'm really pleased that the government has now agreed the additional funding of £60 million. I hope, in fact, that as far as Salford is concerned, we won't be relying.
4 minutes, Councillor Garrido.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We won't be relying on Mr. Burnham giving us handouts or his crumbs to Salford, and that we will be making our decisions out of that money as to how much we need, rather than relying on what's being handed to us by Mr. Burnham. So I think that's all I'd like to say at this stage. I just hope, in fact, that that at some stage, in fact, the city mayor will acknowledge that this city has received tens of millions of pounds from the government to help fight COVID. Yes, we can always. Okay, yes, we could always do with more. I'm sure more is going to be made available, such as the additional amount which has now been made available for further school meals later in the year.
Thank you, Councillor Garrido. Councillor Turner.
Excuse me. Thank you, Chair. Can I associate myself with the remarks regarding welcoming in the new Chief Executive? And also, I was very pleased that we were able to manage a ceremony at the Civic, which I watched on the webcast, which I thought we did really very well on that. So I'm pleased that we were able to carry that off. As far as the City Mayor's statement, well, it's the same old thing, isn't it? Not the government, bash the government, never mention about all the money the government give, whether it's cycleways or anything else. But I thought most of his remarks were better addressed to Stockport Metropolitan Council, because it's they that he needs to convince, him and his colleagues, because it was quite clear last night they were totally opposed to the GMSF as it stood. And I don't know quite what they think they're going to get by deferring it, but I'm sure my colleague Mike Hurlston, the Tory leader, will be very pleased to be called sensible for once. So I'm going to leave it there, because I don't think the rest of what he says is really worth comment, not as far as I'm concerned anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Councillor Cadden-Garrido.
Thank you, Ceremonial Mayor. I just want to ask a couple of questions. Could the Mayor confirm that with regards to the backdating of the money, that will go back right to the very beginning of us being in lockdown number 2, tier 2? Could you confirm that that money will be coming to Greater Manchester and to Salford? And my second question is, I understand, after which we've not had confirmed yet, verbally confirmed, that the 60 million that was coming to Greater Manchester has actually arrived, which actually means that it's £20, I think, per person within the whole of Greater Manchester. And listening to comments that was made at Greater Manchester, I am very concerned, and I think Councillor Robin Garrido touched on it, with regards to what was happening to the money. it seemed that the leaders were under negotiations or discussions on where this money is supposed to be spent. No, that is not good enough. That £20 per head is for Salford, and we should be fighting for that 20, not having less and not having more. And we should be absolutely fighting the rest of the leaders within Salford and Andy Burnham that money is for the people of Salford. And I don't want to hear any negotiations that it goes somewhere else. That money belongs to Salford. And can I just say, just quickly on the GMSF, can I say it's taken over 5 years, because when Andy Burnham came in as the mayor, he withdrew the one that was there before and said he was going out to actually bring this back. It's very strange, isn't it, that it's coming back when he's just about to leave office as the Greater Manchester Mayor. And I just feel that this has taken so long to actually come here. And yes, we do have concerns about it. And I will be speaking about the comments that Councillor Antipas made. But I just want to confirm that the money is available and that it is coming to Salford and not will be diluted, and that the money will be backdated. And my final comment, Chair, is that why did Greater Manchester think that it was different from Liverpool? Liverpool accepted the money. Why did Greater Manchester think that they were so different from the other authorities that had accepted the money? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greedo. Councillor Mary.
Thank you. Okay. Let me start by saying that being accused by Councillor Garrido of being unstatesmanlike city mayor is a bit like it being accused by Donald Trump of election fraud. Actually, I wouldn't worry too deeply about that particular allegation, because I've seen the tremendous anguish that you've been through over the last few months, trying to make this happen and trying to make it happen in the best interests of all the people of Greater Manchester. And they may have some delight in the fact that we've had to defer it today, but the fact remains that I am worried that Councillor Garrido appears to be doing the equivalent of sitting on a branch of a tree, cheerfully sawing it away and wondering what's going to happen when the branch falls to the ground with him on it, because the point about it all is that you're trying to put in place a series of protections for the ordinary people against unwanted development in their particular area. And that's exactly what the whole point of the GMSF is, to have a coherent plan that actually tackles those particular problems and defends their interest. The second point I want to make is about was Andy Burnham right to fight for the people of Greater Manchester and the people of Salford? I'm sorry, I happen to think that he was right. Can I remind this council that my party called for a lockdown 2 weeks earlier than the government even considered? Right, and if we'd had that, we would now be coming out of lockdown in a lot better shape than we are. Because the government dithered, the government which Councillor Garrido and others want to support, because they dithered on that, we are now paying the price in Greater Manchester and elsewhere across the country for the damage that has caused in terms of actually not taking the brave decisions at the right moment in time. And yes, Andy Burnham was right to fight for the people of Salford, to fight for greater resources, to fight for businesses that are going to be put to the wall and are going to suffer poverty as a result of the policies of this government and the party opposite. I have got no doubt whatsoever that Andy Burnham and the leaders, including a Conservative leader, incidentally, were right to support the interests of the people of Greater Manchester and fight for more resources. Now, we are where we are. We're in a situation that is incredibly difficult, and I'm hoping that we manage to get out of this as smoothly and as easily as possible. But I think I want to pay tribute to all the hard work that the City Mayor has put in fighting for the ordinary people of Salford, and not forgetting the homeless, not forgetting the people who are trying to make ends meet in terms of the small businesses, not forgetting the staff that are furloughed and are not wondering where their wages are going to come from in the future. All of that, I believe, the City Mayor actually encapsulated in that statement. And I'm sorry if for some people they felt that we fought too hard for Greater Manchester and for the people of Salford, and we should have just simply rolled over and accepted whatever the government was prepared to offer us. I think the Mayor's done the right thing. I think the Mayor of Greater Manchester fought on our behalf, and I, for one, am grateful that the fight continues.
Thank you, Councillor Mary. Councillor Androbus.
Thank you. I'd like to endorse what Councillor Mary has just said about the role of the City Mayor. I think that the City Mayor, particularly with the GMSF, has fought very hard to ensure that in Greater Manchester we have a robust, evidence-based plan which is needed in order to resist the situation that we will have of planning by appeal, where developers are allowed to come along and say that there is no plan in place, that the councils haven't made provision for sufficient housing. Therefore, instead of it being determined by a plan, it should be determined by developers putting in planning applications, and when we refuse them, taking it to the government for appeal. We need to avoid that at all costs, and I understand that there will be members of the opposition who have individual concerns about elements of the plan. But I think what the City Mayor has been saying, and the message that we've tried to give today, is the importance of making sure that we deliver that plan for Greater Manchester. And it's very important for Salford. If we have planning by appeal, there are another 691 hectares of greenbelt which have been identified by developers as suitable for housing development. Another 7,400 houses could be built on the greenbelt in Salford if we end up with a situation where it's developers that lead where development should go, rather than us as a community expressing our views through the local plan. And we know that because the developers in the call for sites at the start of this process identified the very sites. In Warton, 3,250 homes to be built on Ellesmere Park Golf Course and Linnyshaw Moss. In Swinton and Pendlebury, 1,600 homes to be built, mainly on Wardley Moss. In Worsley and Boothstown, another 1,500 homes to be built. And in Cadishead, another 1,500 homes to be built. All of this is a very real risk to us unless we have a plan in place. Let's have the debates about the plan. Let's decide what is right and what is wrong to include in the plan. But believe me, the greatest threat that we face is not having a plan at all. So it's incumbent on all of us to use our influence on colleagues elsewhere in Greater Manchester to make sure that this plan is delivered.
Thank you. Councillor Hines.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, I'd just like to thank Derek Antrobus there for what his comments have just been, the serious situation that if we don't grasp this nettle and move forward, it could be in a far, far worse. And as far as our City Mayor is concerned, I mean, he's worked tirelessly and continued to work tirelessly for the interests of the people of Salford. That has been demonstrated over and over again. And I refute what Councillor Robin Garrido said about playing party politics and his reference to Andy Burnham. And I can't comment on why Liverpool accepted what they accepted, but I know that Andy Burnham Paul Denny and the rest of the Manchester leaders had quantified the amount of money needed in those situations, and it came down, remember, to £5 million difference that the leaders would have accepted and what the government was offering. And what's a real disgrace is that the government must have known, discussions must have been taking place at Cabinet with the Chancellor and the Prime Minister, that we were going to go into a full lockdown, and therefore the money that was going to be available pales into significance, the £5 million that was at odds. So I think that Andy Burnham was absolutely right. Paul Dennett was absolutely right. The leaders of Greater Manchester were absolutely right in fighting for the needs of the people of this conurbation and the Greater Manchester area. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair of the Council. Just a few comments in support of the City Mayor and a few wider comments, if I may. A former governor of New York State, Mario Cuomo, said that you campaign in poetry but govern in prose. This, I think, sums up the current state of the government and our Prime Minister, other than that the prose is very, very poor. Boris Johnson is a good campaigner. He's very good out on the stump. He's good when there are friendly photos and friendly journalists there and so on. But governing is hard work, and good governing is harder still. And I just simply feel that the Prime Minister is not cut out for the detail of government. For example, as First Lord of the Treasury, he seems to have lost a grip on the finances of the nation. We're now over £2 trillion in debt, over 100% of gross domestic product, and rising. And if you recall a few years ago, when there was the financial crash, Tory MPs and indeed our own good councillor Robin Garrido constantly blamed the Labour government for this, which was wrong, of course. But having said that, that crisis was handled far more competently by Gordon Brown and his ministers than Boris Johnson and his minister are currently handling the current crisis. The Prime Minister also seems to have lost a grip of the millions of pounds of contracts that are being dished out, sometimes to friends of his members of Parliament and so on. And he ignores the civil service protocols, which says that those contracts should be published within 30 days. I understand that's not happening. And we now seem to have an unelected partner of the Prime Minister that seems to be directing the direction of the government rather than the Prime Minister himself. Some time ago, we had Michael Gove condemning the experts, but surely now we're relying on the scientific experts to find a solution to our global pandemic. And the City Mayor mentioned Marcus Rashford, a young footballer from Wythenshawe, who seems to have a greater feel for the needs of the needier children of our nation than the Prime Minister and his ministers. But looking farther afield, there is, I think, something that helps to lift the global doom and gloom. And I point to two aspects in particular. The first is the election of President-elect Joe Biden and his Vice President-elect Kamala Harris in the United States, history-making in the case of Kamala Harris. And the second is the good news of the arrival of at least two vaccines that seem to be able to tackle the pandemic. And that brings to mind the words of the Irish poet Seamus Heaney when he said that but then once in a lifetime, the longed-for tidal wave of justice can rise up and hope and history rhyme. So it's not all depression. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor King. Can I remind people when they're making comments or asking questions, it's to the Mayor and about the Mayor's statement to us as Council. Councillor Jones, you're next.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to raise two issues, which I'm sure the City Mayor is aware of, but does he appreciate that when AGMA was set up, the Association of Greater Manchester Authorities, I think it was set up in 1986, and there was a lot of reasons why it was set up at the time, but the biggest reason for me was to try and give Greater Manchester an advantage with government, if you like, over any other regions, because we were able to demonstrate all 10 authorities could work together. Now, obviously, since AGMA existed, and during that time, as you can imagine, there were plenty of arguments and rows that went on, especially between the political parties and between the local authorities. But nevertheless, we got through it, and for what, 34, 35 years, we've managed to keep that consensus going. So no one will regret more than me if Stockport can't approve GMSF. But in my opinion, and I'm giving in a personal opinion, if they won't agree to that, I think the 9 authorities, local authorities, should move ahead with the public consultation, even though I know Councillor Antrobus and the City Mayor won't be best pleased, because the whole report will have to be rewritten. It's not just, we can't take the existing report, it will take some time to rewrite it. But I do think the 9 authorities should move ahead, and Stockport will have to take their chances if they do that, because they'll be under bigger threats on investment, and they'll be on bigger threats on green belt and development and all the rest of it. But it's their choice. If they want to play politics in Stockport, then they're going to have to suffer the consequences. I just wanted to mention one other thing, because it's obvious that Councillor Robin Greedo, he's received his usual briefing from Conservative Central Office, and he's doing his best to support the Prime Minister. But when I heard the Health Secretary the other day, Matt Hancock, he failed to acknowledge the fact that government instruction months ago was to remove elderly people from hospitals without testing and put them into care homes. That decision killed many hundreds of people, possibly many thousands of people, and the government refuses to acknowledge it. So I hope sooner or later, when Councillor Greedo, Robin Greedo, talks about playing politics, we're not playing politics, we're playing people's lives. And people have been killed as a result of terrible decisions made by the government. And that one was probably the worst decision on record. Absolutely. And it is on record, and it needs to be dealt with. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. I want to make comments on Councillor Robin Garrido's remarks regarding the Greater Manchester Mayor and the Salford City Mayor standing up for local people and local people's needs, because he's clearly not thinking about local people when he makes his remarks. I'm well aware of many self-employed people who are getting no funding whatsoever whilst they're in lockdown, and they're losing money and they're suffering hardship. And that's because of the criteria set by the Conservative government. And so Salford City Council, as I'm well aware, is struggling under demand from people to try and help them when they can't, because the criteria has been set by the government. And it's a total disgrace that Councillor Robin Garrido should be making the comments he's making about Greater Manchester Mayor and the Salford City Mayor standing up for local people.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Bort.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to make a comment after the City Mayor's speech, just to say thank you for having the needs of the residents of our city at the heart, and as a servant leader leading this council and the city in a way that reflects that, because many people say that the people of the city are the main asset of the city. However, our mayor and the cabinet and the council at large, they don't just talk the talk, they walk the walk. And after the Grenfell disaster, before any central government funding was even discussed, the mayor and the cabinet decided to straight away allocate funding to strip the dangerous cladding and to protect the lives of our people. And from today's speech by our city mayor, my heart is overwhelmed with gratitude for this one comment, for a lot of things, but this one comment. When the announcement came that our children across the land, across this nation, were not going to have funding for their school dinners, possibly the only hot meal these kids would have in that day, our mayor and the cabinet and this council straight away announced without any hesitation, with the needs of the people of this city, with the needs of these children, of the children of our city at heart, announced without, as I said, without any hesitation, we are going to support these kids. It's not even a political issue, which of course a lot of us here, sitting here, would say it is a political issue. But even if you take it out of this context into the outer space, it's wrong to take food from the little ones. And I just want to congratulate the mayor and our council at large for stepping in, regardless of the hardship of the situation, the funding, or the lack of it, just having the needs of our little ones at heart, and just supporting the hot meals for our free hot meals for our children. Thank you so much, and I hope you stay well to continue leading this city and the council with compassion and the grace. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Birch. Now, I only have one more person on the list, and then I'll hand back to the City Mayor. Councillor Collinson. Councillor Collinson.
Thank you, Chair. I just really want to say that I think it is absolutely appalling and disgraceful that the City Mayor has been so political about this pandemic. We should have been working as a cross-party to deal with all the issues. And I would like Councillor Walker to retract his comment about when he said that Councillor Garrido doesn't care about his residents. We on our side are passionate about our residents, and we work so hard to try and keep them safe and do everything that we can do for them. And I think it's disgusting, actually, to listen to what's been said today. We have got different problems possibly than some of the more deprived areas in the city, but we've still got problems, and we try and address them as best we can. And I take exception to my councillors being told that they do not care about their residents. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one more person who's snicked in, and Councillor Edwards, you've got a comment you'd like to make. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if my background's the right way around, but you have to deal with that. I'm sure the Mayor would agree with me. I'm just flabbergasted, actually, by the comments that I've heard in response to his speech. Play centre workers, pub bartenders and the others in our community, in the wards that we represent, who would have been affected by the government's Tier 3 lockdown, should never have been financially punished for just being so unlucky to work in the wrong sectors. They should never have been worried about being pushed into poverty because of decisions the government have made to not furlough them and to not extend the scheme to the people that we represent. 66% is not enough to live on. I appreciate there were proposals to support the lowest earners with universal credit, but that wouldn't help anyone that was recently employed. It wouldn't help those whose incomes were the lowest income plus £1. They still would have had their income at 66% and their outgoings at 100%. Many of us have lived in what can only describe this year as misery and despair, and I think we have to acknowledge, I'd hope the Mayor would too, that some of that was inflicted by the government because they were unwilling to financially support people who worked in those sectors. I don't think the barmaid of my local pub should have been punished, and the children that she brings up and does such a good job, because she simply worked in a pub. I want to just clarify that Liverpool leaders offered their solidarity with GM, and this fight was about all people affected by local lockdowns, because when there were differences in the tiers, for example, the fact that Manchester's gyms didn't have to close and Liverpool's were closed, Liverpool were then able to negotiate to improve their situation. So had GM won the battle, it would have benefited Liverpool and Lancashire too. Of course, now we were told exactly what GM were asking for was not possible, but it was immediately introduced when the entire country was on lockdown. This was a fight for the North, and the government have proved that they do not care about the North as much as they care about the South. I just want to say as well, I hope the Mayor agrees with me, that holding power accountable is not politicking. Standing up for the people you represent is not politicking. And losing support for failures is something you should hold responsibility for, not to call others for politicking if they have highlighted those failures and held you to account. Andy Burnham, the City Mayor, and all the GM leaders, including a Conservative leader, were doing the right thing to call for it, stand up for their people. And in my opinion, they're a far better job than this government have over the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. City Mayor, you have 13 comments and questions I'm sure you'll respond to. So back over to you, City Mayor.
Thank you very much, Chair. That's much appreciated. Obviously, there's a lot to get through, so let's crack on. So the first one is Councillor Robin Garrido. I noted your comment with regards to the spatial framework, in that people of the city and residents have not been adequately listened to, or sufficiently listened to, I think is the word you chose. Just to remind members of this council, the GMSF has been in a state of becoming since it was agreed, I think, back in 2014, that the city region would pursue a spatial plan. Colleagues will know that in 2016 it was consulted on across the entire city of Salford as well as Greater Manchester, and it was also consulted on in 2019, and thousands of households and members of the public have engaged with the process to date. And obviously what we're proposing here is a further consultation and submission to the Secretary of State. So, you know, I think we can demonstrate clearly that we've engaged, we've listened, we've amended, we've incorporated points that members of the public have made. And unfortunately, the consequences of this are that there has to be some reduction in Greenbelt to meet the target that the government has set for local housing need. And as I highlighted in my speech, that's a target that the government are talking about already, tinkering with yet again to increase the housing numbers in the north of the country and the Midlands to protect their Conservative chums in the south of the country. Again, an absolute disgrace when it comes to how this country is engaging with spatial planning. Also, on the Greater Manchester pantomime, and you know, there's been a lot of conversation in the questions and the comments at full council today about this. I just want to make it clear to every member of this council that Greater Manchester negotiated with the government in good faith. We took an evidence-based approach, i.e. we did our homework, we made the calculations, made those submissions to government. But I have to say, my involvement in this all along made me feel as though government wanted to gain the complicity of Greater Manchester for what would be inadequate funds coming our way to support the self-employed, to support businesses, and to support those that national schemes seemingly don't take account of. And I'm talking about the 3 million people who are working in our economy that are now referred to as the excluded group because of the ineffectiveness of the schemes that have come forward to date. These are people who are employed, these are people who pay taxes in this country, but government hasn't seemingly seen fit to come forward with schemes to support those individuals that Councillor Edwards was just referencing. But I have to say, on the GM pantomime, you know, I will always fight for the interests of the people of Salford. And I don't think government really cared about the interests of the people of Salford. Otherwise, they would have engaged with us properly and robustly in the negotiations. And let's get this clear. At the start of these negotiations, we were told there was no money. We get to the end of the negotiations and we're talking about 65 million pounds. So quite where the government suddenly miraculously found this money from is unbeknownst to me. And then days after the standoff with government, that was obviously a public affair with national media and press, the Chancellor addresses the House of Commons with a whole host of business support. So they'd suddenly found their magic money tree in the back of Number 10's garden. So it's pretty scandalous to say that we didn't do this in good faith. I have to say the lack of good faith was on the government's part and certainly not on the part of the people involved in these negotiations in Greater Manchester. Coming to Councillor Turner, I found his comments interesting in that, you know, he didn't actually cite any of the positive information I've shared with full council today. I shared with you, positive developments around the employment figures, investment in green infrastructure, innovations and latest developments at the University of Salford. There was a lot of good points in my speech, but yet again, Councillor Turner tried to spin it as though I'm just being negative and I'm not mentioning things. I even mentioned support for cycleways, which he claimed that I didn't really congratulate the government on. Well, I clearly have, because I've referenced it in my speech. I thank him for his comments about the sensible Conservatives in Stockport, and this really speaks to the point that Councillor Antrobus raised. Make no bones about it. If we do not agree a spatial framework for Greater Manchester, what we are doing is ceding power to developers and landowners to decide Greater Manchester's future for it. So I sincerely hope that the Conservative members on Stockport Council and also the independent members on Stockport Council quickly realise this, because it's really important. The plan is put in place for between now and 2037 to protect our future and the future of generations after us. This is really, really important that we actually get this plan agreed. And I say that also at a time when we know national government again are tinkering with the methodology to potentially increase the amount of house building we will need to do in the future in Greater Manchester. So arguably getting that scheme in place now is really, really important. Councillor Karen Garrido, you asked some very specific questions around the business support, and I was only yesterday in the office agreeing the latest policy digest to send to all councillors and partners in the city, articulating the 4 schemes that the government have brought forward, and obviously the discretionary funding they've given to Greater Manchester. I can confirm to Councillor Garrido that we have received 1.8 million at the end of last week to support those individuals with tier 2 restrictions between August and November. I can also confirm that the methodology that the government is using to calculate discretionary support, so this is the 60 million that's talked about, has also been received at the end of last week in the city of Salford, so in the city council. We've received £5.4 million from the government. What I would say though is doing per head of population calculations to determine the level of discretionary support we need in the city of Salford to support businesses and individuals who are self-employed and those struggling at this point in time is not necessarily the best way to robustly calculate the needs of the city. Dare I say it to Councillor Garrido, it's a very crude way of allocating funds, although obviously I accept it is money that we didn't have that we now have, and we will use it as quick as we possibly can to support those businesses. But yet again, what we're seeing here from the government is a lack of robustness in terms of governance and in terms of how they take decisions. And I think it was Councillor King who drew Council's attention to this today, and I thank him for that. So hopefully, Councillor Garrido, that confirms your questions that you've asked there. Councillor Merry, thank you for your comments about, Andy being right to fight for the interests of the people of Greater Manchester and Salford. I totally agree with you. I think it was, it was the government, in a sense, that were forced to U-turn, if you remember, on the ending of furlough. And I'd like to think, our negotiations in Greater Manchester have led to what has been a positive development nationally to support people who are really struggling at this point in time. And, in a sense, what we had to do is drag the government nationally, kicking and screaming almost, to reinstate those furlough arrangements, despite making the case time and time again to government in the run-up to those negotiations. And also, colleagues will know, the government has announced that it's bringing in tier 2 government support. So I was a bit perturbed at some of the questions that were being asked, because it's quite clear if you read government announcements and what's in the press and the media that, you know, government are bringing in tier 2 government support. And as I've confirmed, Salford's allocation is 1.8 million. I was just a bit concerned why those questions were being asked, because that was a matter of public record some time ago. So thanks, Councillor Murray, for your supportive comments there. Councillor Antrobus, thank you also for reminding us of the importance of the GMSF. I think in your address you drew attention to the 691 hectares that have been identified by developers through this process, an additional 7,400 homes potentially being built in Salford over and above what's already allocated in the spatial plan. This is a real concern and further reaffirms the absolute necessity to get on with the spatial plan to protect our most precious green belt and green infrastructure across the city. Councillor Hines, thank you again for your kind comments and your observations with regards to the Greater Manchester negotiations. For me, you're absolutely right. We should have fought, and we did fight, and it was the right thing to do morally and ethically. We engaged with the government in good faith, and then to see literally days after the breakdown of those negotiations, the Chancellor addressing the House, I can't even begin to tell you how that made me feel. It made me feel as though the government was stringing us along, they had an agenda, and ultimately it made me feel that the government had lied to us and they hadn't engaged with us in good faith, which for me is utterly, utterly scandalous. Because this for us has always been about people. It's not about pound signs, it's not about money. Yes, we do have a methodology for calculating support, and we shared that with the government. But I don't believe for 1 minute that this was good faith. It certainly isn't demonstrative of that when you evaluate it in retrospect. Councillor King, thank you for your comments. I mean, you drew attention to the national situation in terms of the economy, you know, more than 2 trillion in debt, over 100% of GDP and rising. These are real concerns, and what they point to for myself is decisions in the not too distant future on taxation, decisions on spending and potential further austerity, and decisions on fiscal policy. And I'll be watching closely in the spending review at the end of this month to see what the Chancellor announces, because I'm determined that, you know, the cost of COVID-19 should absolutely not be falling on the most vulnerable in society. And I kind of ask all members of this council to call out the government if we see that happening, because for me, the people with the broadest shoulders should be the people who actually bear the costs of paying for all of this borrowing. And I think there's a really important point to make in all of this, and you talked about governance. It's very easy to point to pound signs, you know, the latest round of quantitative easing that the government has done, as though the government is somehow benevolent. Let's not forget the government is stewarding the British people's money. It is not their own money. It is not the benevolence of the government. And at the end of the day, for me, there's a difference between spending and spending well. And I think with some of your comments, Councillor King, you clearly highlighted some real concerns, which I hope the government will thoroughly investigate forensically to understand what on earth is going on. Because like you, I'm deeply concerned about the millions of pounds I read almost regularly in the papers going to contracts for Conservative Party chums, and also the breaking of civil service protocols, or at least the ignorance of them. So absolutely share your observations, and I sincerely hope that the Labour Party in opposition actually holds the government's feet to the fire on all of these fairly scandalous developments I'm observing almost on a daily basis. Councillor Jones, thanks for your comments about, you know, the history of the Association of Greater Manchester and the partnership working within Greater Manchester. Obviously, we've, you know, delayed now the GMSF in Stockport, and we've withdrawn it today from the council agenda. So, I'll be quickly working with colleagues within the Greater Manchester Combined Authority and the leaders of Greater Manchester to understand how we can hopefully move forward as a plan of the 10. If we don't get a successful vote in Stockport in the near future, then I absolutely will be talking with other leaders to see if a plan of the 9 is the right way to go. So you have my reassurance on that. And it's a shame, given that Stockport, as you rightly highlight, are the biggest beneficiary of the spatial plan, that they're considering, not supporting it at their full council. Also, thanks as well for your comments with regards to, elderly and the protocol that was established to remove them from hospitals and place them into care homes. I've seen these developments, and I'm deeply concerned at what's happening there, and I hope a thorough investigation and inquiry is undertaken with regards to all of this, that is transparent and accountable, because there's a real public interest in what's happened here in terms of the government's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. Councillor Walker, thanks for your comments in terms of standing up for local people. I think fundamentally that is the job of politicians, and it's incumbent upon all of us as members of this council to stand up for the people we seek to serve and represent. And I will continue to do that in the best way I possibly can in the interest of the people of Salford. But I'm aware, you're aware of, many employees in the city who are not able to get access to that government support. And I've already highlighted the 3 million taxpayers, 10% of the UK workforce, which is classed as the excluded group from a lot of the support that the Chancellor's come forward with. Why? Because of the date that they became self-employed, potentially because they don't have a rateable value on their property because they're, it's a co-working space. Limited companies are also caught up in this. And as Councillor Edwards has highlighted, it disproportionately impacts certain industries, especially retail and food and beverage and a whole host of things. But 3 million people are not being adequately supported by the government. And government have an opportunity at the end of this month with the comprehensive spending review to properly announce support for the excluded group within our country. Councillor Birch, thank you for your kind comments with regards to the support for families and little ones in the city. When government made the announcement that they wouldn't be continuing the support for families reliant on free school meals, morally and ethically, I couldn't just stand by, and I had to act along with other members of the mayoral team. I'd like to specifically thank Councillor Boschall and also Councillor August for the excellent work they've done, working with amazing officers to turn that around in breakneck speed. So, thank you for your kind comments, but the thanks really goes to everyone who worked on that to make that happen, not necessarily myself, but thank you for your comments. Councillor Collinson, I just want to be clear, this isn't about politics for me. Everything I've tried to say is evidence-based, it's grounded in fact, and this isn't about being political with the pandemic for me. This is about holding government's feet to the fire. It's about advocating for the people of our city and the communities of our city. And when things are quite clearly not manifesting themselves in the way that they should, and I'm talking there about the government negotiations, I think it's absolutely right and proper in the public's interest that we are communicating that in an open and transparent way, because I'm not going to be complicit in selling the people of Salford and Greater Manchester down the road when we know what government were offering us in financial terms wasn't enough to support everyone we needed to support. So you used the word disgusting, and I'll use it back, really, because I think it's disgusting we were told originally that there was no money. I think it's disgusting to tell us that the government were negotiating in good faith, and then our experiences tell us very different. I was disgusted, and I think it's disgusting that the money was found literally days later when the Chancellor addresses the nation. And also it was found, later on in the negotiations, i.e. on the very last day. And I think it's disgusting that we've been lied to by the national government. So those are my observations. Those are my thoughts. And Councillor Edwards, thanks for your anecdotes and your real human consequences of all of this, because let's not forget, we are elected representatives in the city of Salford. We're here to serve and represent the people of this city. And, I thank Councillor Edwards for sharing with us all, the stories, the anecdotes that she's experiencing as a ward councillor in her ward and in the city in terms of the hardship families, loved ones and the people of Salford are facing at this point in time. You're absolutely right to highlight that Liverpool leaders offered solidarity with Greater Manchester once it became clear that the negotiations had fallen down, and we were advocating to support people in Greater Manchester. And you're absolutely right, Councillor Edwards, our job is holding power to account, and that is very different to politicking. And I thank you for your comments, and I hope colleagues of this council will continue to advocate, lobby and hold to account the government in the interests of the people of Salford. Thank you very much.
Thank you, City Mayor. You can go and have a drink now. You must have talked yourself dry. Agenda number 13, general questions and comments to cabinet members. And I haven't had any questions passed to me, and so we'll go through them one at a time. Any questions or comments to Councillor Tracy Kelly? She's the statutory deputy city mayor, but she's also responsible for housing and neighbourhoods. Any questions or comments? No. Councillor John Merry.
Sorry,
Councillor Collinson's got a question.
Sorry, there's two. Could you be a wee bit quicker putting the questions in if I don't see them? I'll go to the next item.
Yeah,
so,
sorry.
Councillor Collison.
I just wanted to ask Councillor Kelly, whenever former Councillor Gina Merritt was with us, she used to give a regular report on the number of empty properties that we had in Salford. And I was just wanting to know from Councillor Kelly what the current number is and what is actually happening with these properties. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Sorry, thanks. I haven't actually got the specific number. However, we have brought over 100 empty properties back into use. I'm happy to direct an email, and I'll direct it to all councillors after this meeting if that's appropriate.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly.
Thanks.
Questions to Councillor Merry, Deputy Mayor, Lead Member for Children's Services and Young People Services. Councillor Saunders, you've got a question.
I have, thank you, Chair. It relates to a record of decisions that was sent out in Councillor Mary's name, I think on Monday, with regards to the council's nominations for school governorships, and it mentioned that St Paul's in my ward had a vacancy. Clearly, this follows the sad passing of Councillor Peter Connor last year, who, of course, hasn't been replaced because of the lockdown situation. I'd just like to point out that after Peter Connor's passing, I was sounded out about whether I would be interested in taking up that position, and I understand that the chair of the school, who was actually a guest, a +1 at my daughter's wedding earlier this year, was happy with that. But I noticed that it is just listed as a vacancy. So could I have some clarification on that? Thanks. And by the way, I've also put down a question for Councillor Hines.
Everybody that's put in requests for questions, you have to put them back in when I mention the lead member's name, because I'm lost. Councillor Merry, do you want to respond?
Very quickly, I'm afraid I didn't sound Councillor Saunders out. I don't know who did sound them out, but I'm perfectly happy to consider it in the light of his request to represent the local authority. I'm sure he'd be a very able advocate for the policies of the local authority and continue to support it. The job of a local authority governor is twofold, of course. One is obviously to support the school, but the other is to communicate the views and of the local authority. And I'm sure we can look at this further.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey.
Thanks, Ceremonial Mayor. It's a question to Councillor Merry. I want to start by paying tribute to our fantastic teaching and support staff in the city of Salford. They're, of course, working under very difficult circumstances and have made huge adaptations to provide some level of continuity for our young people and parents alike. Will Councillor Merry give a statement on the current position in relation to Salford schools during the second wave and the current position of the trade unions representing those fantastic teaching and support staff?
Right, I'm very happy to do so, and I'm grateful to Councillor Bailey for the question. I do want to join him in paying tribute to all the hard work that is going in by both our teaching and non-teaching staff to keep our schools open and to keep them working. Ward councillors will be aware that we deliver on a confidential basis the latest update in terms of schools in their particular area and the issues they are facing. And it is a very difficult thing to do at the moment, is to keep the schools moving as much as we possibly can. We are having to make very quick decisions. In some cases, schools are having to close because of shortage of staff. In others, because of children isolating, we've managed to contain it within bubbles. And all of that is down to the fantastic work that the teaching and non-teaching staff are doing on the front line. And I want to make a couple of things to say about that. First of all, when I met with the unions, they made it very clear that they are not advocating the closure of Salford schools at the moment. In fact, exactly the opposite. They're desperately trying to keep them open, partly because I think that teaching in Salford and non-teaching staff as well see their job as more than just simply earning a wage, but as a vocation for the future of Salford. And I think that's one of the incredible things which they are doing. Secondly, I think we need to make some commitments as to what we're going to argue for. One of the things I want to argue for is that as when vaccination becomes available, I think teachers and non-teaching staff should be in the front line of people getting vaccinated, quite frankly. They should be, testing should be readily available for them, because if we are to continue to keep our schools open, everybody is desperately striving to do so, then those are some of the policies that we need to adopt in order to make it happen. Why do I think I want to keep the schools open if it's possible to do so? Is because I don't want our children to fall further behind elsewhere in the country. We've got enough inequality which we're having to deal with in Salford at the moment without having to deal with a further layer of problems in terms of children and their future. So I think I'm grateful to the unions for the support they're showing to our children and to the people of Salford. Long may it continue, and we have a responsibility to reciprocate by urging that they're looked after in the best possible way.
Thank you. I'm aware Councillor Boschell's no present at the meeting today, so I would ask that members, if you have any questions, send your questions directly to her. And the next person on the list, Councillor Hines. And Councillor Saunders, you have a question you want to ask.
Yes, Chair. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I could have perhaps asked this to the Mayor or even Councillor Antrobus, but Councillor Hines knows I like giving him homework. What I want to ask, if I may just come back again, I'm sorry, to the GMSF. I'd like to think I'm one of the sensible Conservative councillors that the City Mayor referred to. So I would say, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the Conservative Party or the group, but I I would say, you know, I think the Conservatives want the GMSF to go through, but we want the right version of the GMSF to go through. Can't speak for the Lib Dems. So my question to Councillor Hines is, my understanding is that the government have pledged a large sum of money, I can't remember the top of my head what it is, to GM for development of brownfield sites should the GMSF pass in one form or another. So my question is, what will happen, for example, if Stockport do not endorse it? Is it okay for just 9 councils to go ahead on their own? What would then happen to that government money? And also, I listened to the recording of Stockport's meeting last night. Sad, I know, but I did. And the Labour leader promised to bring it back to council within 2 or 3 weeks. Can we have some clarification, please, as to what our council would like to do in terms of a timescale, because time is very short. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Hines.
Well, Councillor Saunders, you're asking the wrong person this question. I mean, it's never come over my desk, the money that you're referring to. Obviously, I will seek who's been dealing with that, and I'll get back to you. But it's never come across my desk at all.
Thank you.
Chair, do you want me to comment on this?
Yes, please, if you can.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, I can comment on this. So I think what Councillor Saunders is referring to is the £81.1 million of brownfield housing fund monies that Greater Manchester has received from the government. I think it's fair to say that in light of developments with regards to the GMSF, we are going to have further conversations with MHCLG about what this potentially means. But I do know in the letter that Mayor Burnham received from Christopher Pincher MP, I think it was confirmed that local authorities are expected to make progress with their spatial plan or local plans. And arguably, you could say this is about making progress. So, but again, let's wait and see what happens in Stockport, and then we'll take it from there, because I think we're all committed to making progress with the spatial plan for Greater Manchester. What I would say in terms of timeframes is it's difficult for me to, at this point, be really clear on what we will do. What I need to understand is what Stockport are considering in terms of any potential minor amendments, and whether or not that potentially has an implication for the plan overall. So as soon as I'm clearer on why Stockport have requested obviously a delay to consider various amendments, then I'll certainly be updating colleagues of full council as soon as I possibly can. But at this point in time, I don't know. Nothing has been shared with me at this point in time, so I'm just confirming that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you,
Chair. Chair.
Councillor Hines.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, by the way, that a number of councillors, because of the new grant situation that's now before us, that our officers are working hours and hours on, trying to get through a very complicated set of proposals that are there. Councillors have contacted me asking exactly where they lie, or their, businesses that they're speaking on behalf of, where they would go. Obviously, we're working very, very, very hard. And what I will ask Debbie Brown to do, and Steve Fry, because as I've just said, it is a most complicated set of views that we've got to look at the moment. I'll get somebody as soon as possible to get a simplified version so that it aids councillors when their constituents get onto them.
Thank you, Councillor Hines. The next person is Councillor Lancaster, lead member for Environment and Community Safety. Councillor Walker, you wanted to ask a question.
Thank you, Chair. It's a 3-part question. What are the current levels of fly tipping in Salford compared to last year? And what impact is this having on vermin growth in the area? Also, what resources is Salford Environmental Services committing to tackle the issue? And finally, what message does the lead member have to those contemplating fly tipping?
Councillor Lancaster, would you like to respond?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for the question. It's a question which I've been concerned about for some time. And in fact, it's on my agenda for lead member on Monday, a report which went to scrutiny, which I'd asked for, on what exactly is the figures were from in all those areas. And that was done. Just to give you some indication, we actually had reports of rats, for instance, in 2019 of 866 reports. And in 2020, it's gone to 806, 3 more than what it was 12 months ago. However, we've got to recognise there is a problem. And 15 of the wards of the city have actually had increases and 5 have had decreases. And I can provide you with the information ward by ward. Likewise, I can provide, and I've got a full schedule of that report on Monday, which I'll send out to members, where the fly tipping is concerned in across the city, in each ward, and in not just ward, but in the streets as well. That's only domestic fly tipping, not businesses which have been dumping rubbish and recycling, not recycling. It's purely where people are dumping it rather than recycle. I wanted to emphasise that, though, that one thing which we all forget about this is that we do a weekly collection of food waste. And food waste is what attracts rats. Now, the assumption they're making, and some people have been saying, well, we've got to wait 3 weeks for our black bins to be collected. Well, the answer is no, you haven't. A weekly collection is provided for food waste, and I wish more people would take up those options of actually doing food waste collections, because it's quite an important area. If we're going to reduce the rat population, we've got to reduce the amount of food which is hanging around in our streets and dumping rubbish. The other thing which I wanted to, which we recognise in the report on Monday, is the baiting of the sewer drains is something which we do on a regular basis for United Utilities. 7 years ago, the deal was done with Greater Manchester for Salford's contribution for doing that baiting. It's £15,000. That's still £15,000 to date. And one of the recommendations which I'm going to make on Monday is we approach Greater Manchester to actually get that figure increased, because clearly that's where the major problem is within our drains, rats and the infestation. Fly tipping in itself is something which I find deplorable. If you actually look at the list, which I'm going to send out on Monday, right across the city, in there, not all in the same areas, but what is evident is fly tippings occur in certain locations every week. It's seen an alternative collection method by dumping the rubbish on the corner of the street without recognising the consequences of the neighbours. And when you actually look at the number of occasions, and in fact, there was one particular road I won't tell you which part of the city it was, twice a week we're doing to fly tipping from the same spots. And what we've got to do is actually look at finding better ways of prosecuting these people who are fly tipping, and finding out also, why are they fly tipping? There's no excuse for it. There's adequate collection services available to the public for them to actually, without actually dumping on street corners. The other issue which we're also trying to do from Greater Manchester Waste, which I had this opportunity to report on, we're actually looking at, is in January next year, opening at the recycling centres, a second-hand shop to sell goods to the residents. That'll be opening in Earlham in January. I hope that'll also stop people dumping, because there's a lot of good stuff which is being dumped at the present, which some people will be grateful for receiving. So that's an opportunity. The actual situation on fly tipping, just to give you an example, if I can just give you the figures.
4 minutes, Councillor Lancaster.
But first of all, can I just remind you the recycling rate for low-rise accommodation is 52.41%. That's good, but it's still too low. And we ought to be recognising that we can recycle far more than we can and would stop dumping. I mean, in flatted accommodation, that's as low as 20-odd%. What I would do about this situation, I'll just give you an example of the fly tipping which has occurred. In Watson Street, which is in Barton Ward, the same location, 33 times we've been turned out between September 19 and September 20.
Can you wind out, Councillor Lancaster?
But I'll give you the list of these concerns. But what I am keen to do, the council have appointed new inspectors to actually go through some of the fly tipping, to identify who the culprits are and to do greater prosecution. I'd also want to spend a lot of time encouraging people to recycle more and stop dumping your rubbish. Be proud of your city. Don't find it acceptable for people to dump rubbish anywhere it suits them because it's easy. There is a way of dealing with the rubbish which is important, and what we should be asking our residents to support us on this, if there's any evidence whatsoever or they can give us to actually say who's doing the fly tipping, let us know and we'll prosecute them and deal with them quite clearly. But I also want to make sure we deal with some of the larger firms.
Thank you, Councillor Lancaster.
I'll wind up now. Wagons driving up and dumping rubbish. There was an example on last week on TV where they actually confiscated the lorry concerned and used it as the Proceeds Crime Act for taking it off.
Thank you, Councillor Lancaster. We have to move on.
Okay.
The next person is Councillor Antrobus, and we have two people waiting to ask questions. Councillor Karen Garrido.
Thank you, Chairman. Mine wasn't a question, it's actually a comment to Councillor Antrobus. Councillor Antrobus, it's actually about Broad Oak. I have to say that I do not like the implied threat that was given regarding Broad Oak. And it really upsets me that you know, this is actually going out as a scaremongering for people to accept the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework. This has to stop. I accept that Peel, right, will do whatever they can to actually develop any of their land, which is included in the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework, i.e. Broad Oak, Hazelhurst and Lee Road. But please, will you not use the implied threat that if we don't agree to the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework, that Peel will come back onto Broad Oak. And can I just say that if that's the case, Councillor Antrobus, we will be there and we will fight it again and again and again. And I know that there are a lot of councillors here that will fight in their area if Peel owns land near them. So please, can you take it back, the implied threat about Peel on the Greater Manchester Spatial Strategy? That is not good, and that's not good coming from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garrido. Councillor Robin Garrido.
Yes, thank you, Chair. First of all, can I make it absolutely clear that the Conservative group on this council supports a Greater Manchester Spatial Framework, and I use the word "a" rather than "the," because clearly there are flaws in this framework. I think it's rather churlish of the City Mayor not to recognise that the Conservative group have successfully called in the framework, and we're now waiting for the meeting to be fixed. And instead seems to be concentrating his comments on Stockport. I think it's about time he concentrated his comments on Salford, because what we have to say on the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework affects Salford, not Stockport. And what we're talking about, in fact, City Mayor, is the unnecessary developing of particular greenfield or greenbelt sites.
Point of order. We've had questions to the City Mayor. We've already had questions to the City Mayor. I don't understand what Councillor Garrido is doing here. Is this a question to a lead member or what?
It's a comment to the lead member, yes.
Comment to lead member.
Yeah, comment to the lead member. I'm quite entitled to mention your name, City Mayor, but I'm commenting to the lead member. You may not like it, obviously you don't, but you are being told a few home truths. And that is, we're not bothered about Stockport in this chamber, we're bothered about Salford. And that's what the Conservative group are bothered about. We're bothered about whether sufficient work has been done in relation to the land at Hazelhurst, where sufficient work has been done in relation to the land on Lee Road, east of Boostown, and we're concerned about whether sufficient work has been done in relation to the land at Earlham on the Mossland. Those are our concerns, and that is why we've gone for a call-in, and that is why we want change to be made at this stage of the GMSF. According to the report, in fact, it does actually say that our officers have not done any detailed investigation of those 3 sites. And I think that was served 2 of them, certainly, Hazelhurst and Boostown. And that concerns me that we've not even bothered as officers to actually do the detailed work which is necessary. And if we're not careful, that's handing it over to the developers, because the only ones that have done detailed work on those sites are in fact the developers. So let's be clear, this council cannot just approve the GMSF. It's not just 9 if Stockport don't agree, it's 8 if Salford don't agree. Because at the end of the day, you can't disregard the call-in, and the call-in may not support you, Mr. Mayor, or Councillor Antrobus. So let's wait for the call-in, and let's decide what decision they make as to whether any changes can actually be made to the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework. But let's be clear, there is a call-in. This couldn't have been approved today, right? It has to wait for the call-in before it can be approved. And that's what the Conservative group have submitted the call-in to do. Talk about these issues in detail so that we make the right choices for Salford and not the right choices for either Stockport or in fact the rest of Greater Manchester. It's what matters to Salford that we're concerned about. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garrido. Councillor Antrobus, do you want to respond?
Well, I don't think that there's anything to respond to from Councillor Robin Garrido. What he's just said was fatuous and inconsequential. Those issues will be debated at the call-in, and there was no real need to make his gratuitous insults against the City Mayor. I do think that the standard of debate sometimes falls in this council chamber. As to Councillor Karen Garrido, I entirely agree with what she said. She said Peel will do anything they can to develop this land. When she says it, she claims that that is a reasonable point. When I say it, she says I'm scaremongering. I think she really needs to try to understand what she's saying, because what she says is self-contradictory. And again, another fatuous statement.
Thank you. Councillor Gina Reynolds, she's lead member for Adult Services, Health and Wellbeing. Any questions? Councillor Walsh.
Yes, with testing being a major topic of conversation at the moment, and City Mayor mentioned moonshot. Could you tell me, has Salford agreed to be an early adopter with regards to the government's Operation Moonshot using a saliva-based test? This was supposed to commence in September and was intended to be a mass community testing for Salford involving 70% of the population. I would like to know what the current position is, please.
Thanks, Councillor Walsh. Yes, you're absolutely right. The ambition was to undertake mass community testing to better protect our residents. This did start in September, but the reality that we found has been very different due to this government's failings. And I'm not going to apologise for criticising the government during the pandemic. We've been left in a very awkward position because what we communicated to the public back in September hasn't actually materialised, because we haven't done mass testing and we haven't tested 70% of our population. And it's led to difficult conversations, not only with the local and national press, but most importantly with our residents. And it's increased the workload for our staff because we've had to deal with so many inquiries over this. We agreed to this pilot in good faith, and we've been fully committed to working with the government on this in advance of a vaccine. Before we proceeded, the City Mayor and officers and partners wrote to the Secretary of State and to Dido Harding. In fact, during this process, they've written a couple of times, asking for written assurances on several critical issues. And we asked for this before we went ahead. And we were promised that the test was ready for use. It was even confirmed publicly by the Prime Minister that it was ready for use. Instead, we found that the government has set unachievable goals and not delivered on its promises. During September-October, we tested asymptomatic colleagues across partnerships, including our teaching staff, running the LAMP saliva tests simultaneously alongside the PCR tests. But there was limited access to consumables at the Manchester lab that we use. And on the 13th of October, the Department of Health and Social Care, they shifted their approach in Salford from mass community testing to targeting high-risk environments and groups. But we were unable to progress with this due to the lack of consumables, again, available from the Manchester lab. We've asked for clarity on a number of occasions and we haven't had a timely response. And we've also found an unwillingness by the government to enter into serious discussions on testing protocols and procedures and around the data. Currently, this pilot has been ceased while scientists and clinicians from Greater Manchester consider the results of validation undertaken. Because I think it's important that the efficacy and the timeliness are obviously considered with this pilot. Thankfully, the government are financially compensating us for the work that we've already undertaken. But I think we have to be mindful that this Operation Moonshot is already 12 billion being spent nationally. And I have to agree with the recent Guardian article, which described Operation Moonshot like building the Channel Tunnel without civil engineers looking at the plans. Let's hope that the government's going to learn from its mistakes, because now we've been asked to undertake the lateral flow testing following on from the Liverpool pilot. I find it incredibly disappointing how the council have been treated by this government so far. You know, our dedicated staff have put in an incredible amount of work and incredible amount of time into this work, you know, for the benefit of everybody in this city. And I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank them.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Item number 14, agenda item, general questions or comments for chairs of scrutiny committee. Again, we haven't had any forwarded to us, so let's go through the list. Questions for Councillor Jolly. Councillor Adrian Brocklehurst. Councillor Tanya Birch. Councillor Margaret Morris. Councillor Robert Sharp. Fantastic. It has turned 12:30. Can I get somebody to agree an extension to standing orders for, I think we'll be able to get through this in 15 minutes or less. Anybody want to move?
Approve.
Who's that?
Councillor Dawson, approve.
Thank you.
Second, Councillor Walmersham.
Second, Councillor King.
Okay, first and seconded. So the next agenda item is number 15. Questions or comments on the discharge of their functions to the outside authorities and outside bodies. We don't have any questions for that either. So do we have any questions? There's a question on the Lowry, Councillor Fletcher. I don't think this comes under this agenda item. Okay. Item 16, scheduled reports from board members. Now, there's Salford Royal, Working Class Movement Library, Lowry Centre, Centre for Local Economic Strategy, and Salford Unemployed and Community Resource Centre, all of which were sent for note. If people have any questions on any of these reports, please direct your questions to the authors. Any other business I haven't been informed of?
Yeah, no. Yeah, just to say, I should have asked the question under this, not under the previous agenda item. And it is to the people that wrote the Lowry report.
Councillor Fletcher, can you direct it to them and directly rather than this forum? The notes, the reports that we've received are just for noting rather than questioning at this meeting.
Okay,
so,
thank you for clarifying. I will
thank you. There's no other business that I've been notified of. So with that in mind, can I declare this meeting over for today? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.